ugly looking thing on, do I? Okay. There's not a clip? There's not. Okay. Please sit down, everyone. Okay. Like this.
Sorry. This is flexible. Up and down. So further away as you like. It's just the space. Kind of heavy.
Hey, so that's right. Can you hear me, people? Okay. Okay. How about now? Yeah? Okay. Oh, I can't stand this. I'm going to have a mental breakdown. You even took the other one away. Oh, God. Okay. I'll try and be Buddhist about it. Okay, here we are again. I'm not joking. Did anybody die last night? Okay, aren't we lucky? But it's true, we take it for granted, right? I mean, if someone had died, we would have been shocked. But we're not shocked that we didn't die. It's a good point. We should ask that question, you know. So, just reminding ourselves then of our motivation for doing this job, sitting here together, listening to Buddha's take on the world, you know, his view of how the world works, his view of happiness, suffering, these things, you know. It's just a view of the universe, basically. So here we're talking about that. And the reason I'm talking about it is presumably because you want to listen, and then you want to process it and make sense of it and see if it's useful, see if there's something there. Because remember, you are the boss. Buddha is not the boss. It's up to you, you know. So, sorry, I'm not happy here. Hang on. Mark, can you come and help me, dear? That's better. Make it tighter. Let's tighten it or something. Sorry about this. Hang on. Really? Hangs down by the neck there, does it?
Yeah.
That's the plan, is it?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
It's a crummy design. God. You really sure that's how it's meant to be? Not up there like that? Oh, it's dreadful. Can we find me a clip or something? We've got nothing in that? Not now. Later, maybe. Okay. So that's why. So thinking. Okay, I'm going to sit here, listen to these things, process it, think about it, see if there's something useful. That's the idea. And so I'll sing that little prayer again. Just sort of states that out. That motivation. Sangye cheran soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi pesonam ki drola penchir sangye drubha shog. Sangye cheran soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi pesonam ki drola penchir sangye drubha shog. Sangye cheran soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi pesonam ki drola penchir sangye Drupasho. Okay, so far what we've talked about, touched upon, is Buddha's view of what the mind is. Not physical, a continuity, beginningless, not created by anybody else, not given to us by somebody. For the Buddha, this is the wackiest idea. This is the weirdest, most ridiculous idea. The idea that someone can make us. It's for Buddhism like comical, like a joke, you know. That's my words on it. Buddha's more polite than that. It's a bizarre idea, you know. that one's own thoughts and feelings and experiences and emotions can come from someone else. And then the final one about the mind that we've just touched upon, which we're going to now all unpack all of these points, is the potential of the mind. This potential for perfection, for Buddhahood. This is a word for it, that's all. We mentioned that. Just touched upon the concept of the law of karma. Begin to unpack that. And how this fits with the mind. And then the other thing I mentioned, which is crucial as a basis for listening to this stuff, is that Buddha's not a creator. Therefore, this stuff is not made up by him. It is not created by him. It wasn't revealed to him, which is the usual view we have of religion. And I'm not joking, like I said, when I say that Buddha is more similar to Einstein, insofar as what Buddhism is, what karma is, what his view of the mind is from his own experience, from his own findings, which he is then presenting. So then it's up to us to listen, think about, process, and then eventually experience and discover for ourselves whether it is true or not. The onus is on us. Therefore, nothing to do with believing. So therefore, the way to listen to it is to hypothesize. Like any decent scientist, you would take it as a hypothesis. Because you can't think about it. You can't work it out unless you do this. If the mind just goes, that's ridiculous, how can you think this? Then you can't think about it. Your door is closed. Equally foolish is to say, oh yeah, I like the sound of that. I think I'll believe in reincarnation. That's equally foolish. That's ignorance. Because what Buddha's dealing with, which is what we think science is about, which is what Buddha's point is we're dealing with what is true. Wisdom, truth, reality. But it's for us to find out. Buddhism is just one of the many models of the universe in existence, isn't it? You've got the communist view and the Muslim view and the Christian view and Lord knows what. This is just one view and it's up to us. So, of course, the point of a view, the point of a philosophy, and this is where we really do miss this point in our contemporary world, the point of it is that you have to be able to put it into practice. We understand that when it comes to cooking and mathematics and gardening. I mean, you know perfectly well if, you say, oh yeah, I'm a cook, I know hundreds of recipes and I ask you to make me a cake. And you'll say, oh no, I can't do that. I can tell you the recipe. Well, you wouldn't lie and call yourself a cook. You're phony, if you can't make a cake. So theoretical knowledge is crucial, but unless it becomes practical experience, it is useless. But that's unfortunate. We've lost the plot, it seems to me, in our contemporary world. Because we think of philosophy as a bunch of ideas that you keep in your head. And in fact, you're even considered inferior if you dare to make it subjective, in the kind of academic world. It's very bizarre. And so the point of all this stuff in this room that you're going to hear, every single syllable of it, if it cannot be put into practice, then you tear it up and chuck it in the bin. It's useless. That's a fact. Remember this. So as esoteric as it might sound, as abstract as it might sound, give it a chance, Put it on the back burner if it doesn't make sense. Because if it can't be put into practice, it is absolutely meaningless. It's just a bunch of stupid ideas, and how foolish that is. So let's look more into this business of the mind, how the mind works. When you study Buddhist psychology in more depth, you learn what they call the psychological model and the epistemological model. You learn about how the mind functions, technically if you like, and then the actual components, the psychological states, So let's look just roughly at how the mind works, really just very rough for the moment. We could say we've got two ways that our mind functions. We have mental consciousness And remember, the word consciousness is synonymous with the word mind. It mightn't be in all the Buddhist traditions, but the way I'm talking here, these words are interchangeable. Excuse me, I have to drink some water. So you have mental consciousness, and then you have sensory consciousness. And this is a really good point already. Because, so we have, we know the senses. We have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness. So remember the Buddha's view, consciousness is not physical. So tongue consciousness is not the tongue. It's the way to put it is, it's that part of one's mind that functions through the medium of the tongue to taste something. The eye consciousness is not the eyeball. Eye consciousness is that part of one's mind that functions through the medium of the eyeball and all the business working nicely together to perceive shape and colour. Ear consciousness, same. So already this is interesting. This shows how the Buddha would, the Buddha says in general that we are living in a fantasy world because we are not seeing things the way they exist. We experience things in a deceptive way. This is his thing. We're going to go into this. So straight away, hearing how we, work with our senses, we can see the mistakes we make. So I'll go, when I hear that music, I'll go, oh, wow, listen to that amazing Miles Davis. As soon as I hear one trumpet note, it's Miles Davis, okay, I recognize. But your ear consciousness does not hear amazing Miles Davis. Ear consciousness is like a dumb animal. It's very limited in its capacity for cognition. The function of mind in general is to cognize. We'll go into this. So ear consciousness merely cognizes sound. It doesn't recognize Miles Davis. Tongue consciousness, we go, oh, taste that amazing chocolate cake. No. Taste consciousness merely tastes the sweet or whatever it is. So what part of our mind cognizes amazing Miles Davis? Divine chocolate cake. That's your mental consciousness. That's your computer. That's where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions and stories and dramas and good and bad and negative and positive are. That's where the workshop is. And that's our real concern. That's what we have to start to investigate, the mental consciousness. But we give too much power to our senses. We give huge power to our senses. And it's literally, it's a misconception. Your ear consciousness doesn't have the capacity to recognize Miles Davis. It hears sound, and then instantaneously what it does is trigger my mental consciousness, which is where my memory exists, and because my memory is intact, I recognize trumpet, I recognize Miles Davis. My mental consciousness sort of sorts the computer and comes up with Miles Davis, When I taste the chocolate cake, tongue consciousness does its job. It triggers the mental consciousness instantaneously. They work very harmoniously together. And then it pulls up the label chocolate cake. And then all the story starts. There's no space in between, is there, because we're habituated with this. So the senses are limited in their capacity. But we believe in the lies that we think our senses tell us, Oh, look at that ugly person, we'll say. Well, it's just your eye consciousness, seeing shape and colour. It triggers the mental consciousness, and because you have aversion for that person, they appear ugly to you. So you think you're seeing an ugly person. Not true. Okay, so then we have mental consciousness. And like I said, that's where the workshop is. That's where our business is. That's what we have to learn to see, to investigate, unravel, deconstruct, and then reconstruct. To be two things. There's two things: to be in sync with reality and to be happy. And this is a really interesting take that Buddha has on things, This is and here we're discussing the wisdom wing. Compassion wing we'll discuss later. This is, like I said, the wisdom wing is like the nuts and bolts of Buddha's view of the universe. The discussion about karma, the discussion about the mind, the discussion about impermanence, how things exist, the whole business of how things exist. This is Buddha's thing. This is how he talks. So what Buddha's saying in general You know, the relationship between misconceiving things and suffering, the relationship between seeing things as they are and happiness. These two come together, and it's a very interesting mix. So what Buddha's saying is this: the extent to which we are out of touch with reality, the extent to which we are not in sync with how things actually exist, is the extent to which we suffer. And then equally, the extent to which we are in sync with how things exist, the extent to which we are we are in touch with reality, is the extent to which we are happy. So you could say the method, Buddha's method for getting happiness, is to get wisdom. It's very interesting. Nothing to do with getting objects, getting boyfriends, getting nice sounds, which, like I said yesterday, is the philosophy we all have in the world, including the animal realm. Check them up. They're exactly the same as us. They believe when they get the food, they'll get happy. They believe that being is their enemy, so they get upset. This is what Buddha means by samsara. Samsara is like the name for a philosophy, and it's a lying philosophy, the Buddha says. It's this misconception of the universe that has, well, series of layers upon layers of misconceptions. And so this whole business of being a Buddhist or using Buddhism is this one of knowing the mind, observing on the basis of listening to Buddha's views how one does misconceive, and then slowly unraveling, unpacking those lies and ridding the mind of them. This is the method for getting happy. Getting wisdom is how you get happy. It's a very interesting take on things. Kind of just seems quite not natural, you know. One wouldn't think this. So how do we misconceive? What does he mean by this? And how does it cause us suffering? So in the mental consciousness, you can say, you know, we can talk about, we can say that, okay, just initially, we can say the way it works, how it functions. And it's very simple, and we can go into this gradually, you know. The mental consciousness, we either, okay, let's go right back. So what is the mind? How do you define it? This is a very interesting point. You know, we understand this again when it comes to science and botany and mathematics and all the rest. We have to define our terms. We have to all be on the same page. We have to all agree on the definition of something. We understand that with science. But interestingly, when it comes to, you know, maybe the way the world is in philosophy, there's no agreement. There's 1,000 views and new ones every day about how the way the world is. And we don't tend to think we need to be in agreement, you know. And certainly we don't think there needs to be any agreement when it comes to emotional stuff, psychology. So what is the mind? How do you define it? And let's look even more simply. What's the function of even having a definition in the first place? Well, it's so we can communicate, isn't it? So let's say I'm a little girl and I don't know what a cup is, and I say, "Mummy, what's a cup?" So she will give me the definition of a cup, and you'll see that a definition has two parts. The first part tells you its kind of characteristics. She'll say, "Well, darling, it's that round thing over there with a handle, and it's made of clay." And I'll say, "Well, thank you, Mummy, but what does it do?" Because until you hear what it does, until you hear its job, until you hear what its function is, you don't understand a cup. And I'll say, "But what is it?" And she'll say, "Oh, it's what you drink your tea out of." Now I know what a cup is. It's got two parts of definition. Its characteristics and then its job, its function. What is a knife, Mummy? Well, it's a long piece of metal with a sharp edge. Well, thanks a lot. What does it do? It cuts things. When you know this, you are communicating. You know what a knife is, and now you can communicate. And we understand this. When it comes to cups and knives, if we didn't communicate, we'd be in big trouble. But if I say to you, "Oh, I love you," and you say, "And I love you, Robina," we think we're communicating. But excuse me, I ask you to write down what you mean by it, and I write down what I mean by it. We're talking different languages. And we never think we should define our terms first. But we should. That's why we have problems, because we don't. So what's the mind? Well, according to the definition, the definition has two parts. The first part tells you its characteristics. They say it is clear or it is luminous. And don't hear this in a fancy mystical way. It's a practical issue. It simply implies it is not physical. That's all. It is clear, or it's luminous, they say, or luminosity or clarity. And it's not a mystical meaning. It simply means it is not physical. But that's not enough. You've got to know, what does it do? It's very simple. It cognizes. It knows. It is aware. And again, don't put special meanings on these words. They're very simple verbs, and they're all synonymous. To cognize, to be aware, or to know. This is the job of mind. So obviously the question is, to cognize what? And the answer is obvious. That which is real, that which exists. It's very simple. Really down to earth. So if I say to you, there are 2 cups on my table, and we've all got eyes, and we all know what a cup is, we know what a table is, we know what 1 is, we know what 2 is, we look at the table, and if we have, all those pieces are in place, you'll say to me, no, Robina, there is 1 cup on your table. Right? Because that's truth, isn't it? Simple level, that's truth. But my mind has a delusion in it, has a misconception. I believe there are 2 cups on my table. Well, that's a delusion. It's a lie. It's a misconception. So it's a small lie, but look at the trouble it will cause if I stick to my story. Who took my cup? Where's my 2 cups? All this, because we haven't got our facts straight. So wisdom, we make it again like a noble word. Wisdom simply means getting your facts straight. Okay? That's all. So 1 cup on the table, that's a fact. That's wisdom. Well, realizing emptiness, that's wisdom too. It's just a subtler level of wisdom, that's all. More difficult to get. So this is Buddha's thing, continuously. That in our mental consciousness, there are a series of misconceptions, series of states of mind that have the function to lie. And because these states of mind have been lying for so long, we are tricked into believing them. So it's for so long I have believed there are 2 cups on my table. Even when you point out there's 1, I've got a big vested interest in my belief. No, there are not. There are 2. So then we have a war, So the components of these states of mind. Okay, so we said the definition of mind. It is to cognize or to be aware of what? Of that which exists. Why? Because why not? It's the truth, it's reality. And that's what brings happiness. And that's what we're going to look into, just how that's true. Because it seems rather abstract, Being in touch with reality brings happiness. Wow, we thought it was chocolate cakes and handsome boys. So, okay. The way the mind, so the 2 things about the mind, how it functions and then its psychological components. So just briefly here, the way mind functions, there are 2 ways as far as Buddha's psychology is concerned. One is we conceive of things, conception. The mind, the mental consciousness has conceptions, thoughts. This is the grosser way. Then the other, more subtle way, mental consciousness cognizes phenomena, and we virtually never have this experience. Buddhism merely calls it perception. It's a very common English word, but it's got a very specific meaning in Buddhist psychology. It's necessarily non-conceptual, and it's a function of our mind at a much subtler, more refined level, which is what we can access eventually by utilizing these concentration meditation techniques. So let me just touch on this idea very briefly first, before I go into the psychological model and look at these neurotic states of mind that do the lying and cause the suffering. So there was a very interesting, one of these many, many mind and life conferences that the Dalai Lama and his, the Tibetan philosophers have been involved in for the last 20, 30 years with all the best brains in the contemporary world. One of them, I think it was in 2003 in Harvard or somewhere, And the topic was the capacity of the human mind to concentrate. So, okay, the materialists, the scientists, they came up with their findings based, of course, upon their proposition that the mind is the brain, that its function is merely conceptual. Their findings were that perhaps, I forget now, something like 6 seconds was the capacity of the mind to concentrate, however they defined it. Well, the Dalai Lama and his mob, basing their findings on the very different view that the mind is not physical, it is not merely conceptual, that is just the tip of the iceberg, that the mind has the capacity, that we have the capacity to access much more refined, more powerful, more subtle levels of cognition that we don't even posit as existing in our contemporary world. And this is where these meditation techniques come in. And that at this level of consciousness, one has the capacity to concentrate for many months. Now, clearly, the two models are very different. Now, these, materialist scientists know the Dalai Lama is not some kind of peanut, so they said, okay, we'll look into it, But you can't possibly posit that unless you even give it a chance to see how the mind isn't necessarily the brain and how the mind has the capacity to go to these subtler levels. And this is not just Buddha. He took it from the Hindus. They've been working with this stuff for thousands of years before. This is a given in all the Buddhist psychology for thousands of years, And there are countless numbers of experiences of these countless practitioners who have access, including Western meditators, who have access to this more subtle level of consciousness, So, okay, so then at the gross level, the level at which we function from the time we get up until the time we go to sleep, pretty much that's conceptual. Now, this is surprising to us because we know, as far as we're concerned, we have concepts which are up here, and then we have feelings and emotions which are somewhere here. And we would never think that they're the same. But this is a very interesting point. And once we begin to understand this point, we can really be on track in understanding the way Buddha works with the mind. That the Buddha's view is we live at the level of conceptuality, and that includes our emotions. And we're going to go into this to explain. That basically all our emotions, all the feelings, all the positive ones and the negative ones, all the anger, the fears and the panic and the love and the bliss and the joy, based upon having a body, yes, are based on concepts. They come down to being thoughts, concepts about something. And that's what we're going to look into, how this can be. So basically the mind functions, speaking at this way it functions level, there's concepts, which is the gross level, and that's the only level we tend to be in touch with. We're not mentioning the senses here, remember? And then we have this more subtle level of what they call perception or direct cognition, having a direct taste of something, an insight into something at a subtler level. They call this perception. So a simple analogy for this would be you can know the recipe for a cake. That's the analogy for conceptual. But then the taste of the cake, that's like direct knowledge. It's a good way to put it. You could say you know the words about impermanence, but then you have a direct experience of it. You know the theory of the music, but then you can play it. They are the ways to think about conceptual and direct experience. Perception, direct, non-conceptual knowledge, genuine knowledge. Okay. There's that. Now we go to the psychological model, looking into the states of mind themselves. So very simple. The components of this mental consciousness, as far as this model is concerned, it's really simple. We have positive states of mind, negative states of mind, neutral states of mind, which are merely those which are neither negative nor positive. So let's leave those aside. Who cares? The ones we want to get in touch with, the ones we have to look into, understand, experience, and know are the positive and the negative. These are the crux of it. So broadly speaking, as I mentioned already, the characteristic of the positive states, one of their characteristics of the positive states of mind is that their very presence in one's mind is the source of happiness at that moment. Not to mention the acting upon those positive states of mind, like I mentioned yesterday, with our body and speech, leaves imprints or seeds in the mind that will then grow and ripen in the future as one's happy experiences. This is the simple idea of cause and effect, or karma, in that simple idea that we create our own experiences from moment to moment. So then, one of the broad characteristics of the negative states of mind is the presence of any one of them at any given moment right there. It triggers suffering, panic, fears, suffering, and then, indeed, the actions we do on the basis of them leave imprints in the mind that will ripen in the future as one's suffering. So remember, this is not punishment, this is not reward, this is a natural law that Buddha says, what he says he has observed, and it just happens. No one makes it happen. It occurs, like gravity. So clearly we better look into that, if it's how it is. So, okay, if it is true we want to be happy and don't want to suffer, and if Buddha's correct in his assertion that the presence of the happy states of mind and the accumulation of those and the ridding in our mind of the negative states of mind is the method for happiness, then obviously our job is to distinguish between them, to investigate the mind. This is very clear. If you've got pure water and pollution in the same glass, and if we know we can depollute the water, we'd better learn to know how to distinguish the water from the pollution. Because right now they look the same, don't they? Mixed completely together. So we need to do some analysis. That's the job here, being one's own therapist. So the trouble is with this job, it sounds simple, like with the water, it sounds simple, but when the water and the pollution are so merged together, so completely oneness, you've got to be quite sophisticated, isn't it, to extract the pollution without chucking out the water. It needs a lot of intelligence, needs some scientific knowledge. Well, the equivalent is the same. You need an enormous amount of insight and hard work and concentration and a lot of courage, a lot of integrity to begin to sort out this crazy mental asylum inside here. Because, right now it's easy enough to talk about anger. Let's say we discuss anger or jealousy, let's say. We can talk about it in itself, we can talk about how it makes us feel, we can talk about the suffering it causes, we can all agree. But when it comes as an experience, mixed with another 50 different experiences all at once, seeming like a real flowing mixed experience, it's very hard to see the bits and pieces, because it feels like one merged experience. So it's not an easy job, but it is doable, and this is the point. So the first step, if we know that the water can be depolluted, the first step is we better learn to know about the nature of pollution. We have to learn to know what are the characteristics of that pollution, how do we identify it, and then the job of how do we extract it. Same with the mind. We better learn about the pollution. Let's listen to Buddha's view of these negative states. What are their characteristics, and how do they cause me suffering, and how are they different from the positive ones? So there are two main characteristics of the negative states of mind. Because in the beginning stages of practice, they are our main concern. Just like depolluting the water, when you have to learn to know about how to get rid of the pollution, you have to learn to know, you're focusing on the pollution, aren't you? You're getting your hands dirty. If you have to depollute that water of all that filthy oil, you're not worried about the pure seawater. You're concerned with the filthy pollution. You've got to go in knee deep and get stinky and dirty. Same here. The first stages of practice are very much about learning about your miserable old mind here, which is how come we can get pretty depressed, This is why we live in denial much of the time, because it's too painful to take responsibility for what's inside here. We'd rather blame God or mummy or daddy or the boyfriend. So it's not an easy job. You've got to have courage to do it. But the marvellous point, and this is a crucial point, the only reason you want to investigate the pollution is so that you can get rid of it, right? If the pollution cannot be removed from the water, then you are a very stupid person to start investigating the pollution. Please just leave it alone and put some sugar in the water and hope it tastes okay. You get my point here? The only reason you get your hands dirty with that pollution is because you know you can get rid of it, and that gives you courage. You have the view of the potential of that nice pure water, and so that gives you the courage to get your hands dirty. That's the view here. That's why I think the Buddha should have mentioned the third noble truth first. Because the first noble truth is there is suffering, and he goes into great detail, outlining the different levels of suffering. Already you want to kill yourself. The second one is even worse. He then tells us there are causes of suffering, and guess what, baby? Who's the cause? Me. You really want to kill yourself by then. And now you're not ready to hear the third one when he finally tells us, you know what, honey, you can get rid of it. Oh, what a relief. So I like to talk about the third one first. It gives you some courage, you know. We can get rid of suffering. Then you have some energy and excitement to do the first one, which is investigate the nature of the suffering. Because you know you can want to identify it so you can rid yourself of it. And that's a really crucial point. And we forget this. When we get into religion, we get so fundamentalist. We get so caught up in guilt and shame and bad, and I shouldn't be angry and I shouldn't be this. And I mean, it's awful. It's such a misunderstanding, you know. And look at all religions in the world. Look at the fundamentalists. They're the worst. This kind of policeman mind. It's just too terrible. It's wrong completely. Okay, so what are these characteristics of these negative states of mind? There are two main ones. The first one, excuse me, and this is indicated by one of the many synonyms for the word, the term negative state of mind in Buddhist psychology. And that term is disturbing emotion. Well, it's hardly rocket science. Check the last time you were depressed, angry, arrogant, jealous, had low self-esteem. It was disturbing. To you, forget about the people you're harming. It's disturbing, and it's a disturbing emotion. It means it's suffering. It's so simple. It's painful. It is heartbreaking. And actually, if we could just get in touch with this, the pain of these negative states of mind that we all have, this should be enough for us to think, I don't want to be angry anymore. It's too painful. But because we have the philosophy, it's not my fault, he caused it, it never occurs to us to think, maybe I can get rid of anger. We're mainly concerned about this other person stopping doing that thing that makes me angry. So we're not looking into the anger itself. We'll do anything but this. We're deeply involved in either the blame mode of blaming him or the guilt, which is like self-blame. We're not being proactive with it, you know. And that's what we're trying to do here. So we have, in other words, the reason we would want to look into our unhappy states of mind isn't to feel guilty, isn't to make yourself feel worse, just like with that pollution. It's so that you can identify how it causes you pain, so that you can then slowly change it. So actually the basis, the reason to do this is like compassion for yourself, not self-hate. We already have self-hate. Enough. It has to be, I'm fed up with this suffering. It's like compassion for yourself, truly. And that's the Buddhist term renunciation. When you're so sick of the suffering, you realize you have to change. And that's kindness to yourself, not hate. And that takes time to cultivate. We don't have it naturally. You know, ego is so entrenched in its own misery. So the first characteristic of these negative states of mind, which should be evident enough to us, but which we get kind of we kind of get kind of confused about because we think someone else causes it. We know it's suffering, but hey, it's his fault. So we never look at it. We never take responsibility. Now, the second characteristic, and this is the real tasty one, this is really getting into this wisdom teachings of the Buddha, this business of not seeing things correctly. This second characteristic, and this is indicated by this other term, which is a synonym for negative state of mind, disturbing emotion, many others they have as well. It's a really great word in English. the word delusion. Delusion. I know in some languages, when I'm in Spain or France, or Italian I think too, there's no real same word for this. It's quite difficult to get the accurate meaning. But in English it's a great word. Buddha would have loved this word if he'd heard it. I don't think there's an equivalent in Sanskrit. Well, maybe there is an equivalent, but whichever one it is in Sanskrit or in excuse me, in Tibetan, I forget. So let's look into this one. It's so tasty. Delusion. So if someone accused you of being delusional, you'd be really offended, right? How dare you? Because delusional means you're insane. Delusional means you're in la-la land. Delusional means you're not in touch with reality, isn't it? So for normal, ordinary daily life, we don't use this word. It's only a person who's got an extreme mental state. It's a person who has to be locked up or given all the pills, you know, who thinks they're Mozart or something. We think that's delusional. But ordinary daily life, we wouldn't use that term like this. Like I said, we'd be offended if someone accuses us, oh, you're just delusional, Robina, you're making things up. It's very upsetting to hear this. But this is the point that Buddha is making. This is exactly what he says these neurotic states of mind do. It's precise. He says we are delusional. These negative states of mind, precisely, that part of us, their function is to lie. Their function is to misconceive whatever it is that we are experiencing. And this is the point. The point. So how is anger, for example, a delusion? How is attachment a delusion? How is jealousy a delusion? That's the job we have to do. That's what we have to unpack and slowly recognize in ourselves, you know. Now, of course, this means, doesn't it? Delusion implies conceptual. It's a story. And that's this whole business of how all the emotions that we think of are based in being a thought, a story. An elaborate story, absolutely. A deeply ingrained, instinctively held story, yes. Nevertheless, a story. A bunch of concepts that our mind has made up, that has no basis in reality. These words are exactly correct, not just kind of mystical, kind of vague way. When we read Buddhism, we think of it as some interesting mystical idea, but he's being precise. These words are precise, scientific reality, you know. Okay, so as far as the Four Noble Truths are concerned, this packaging of Buddha's teachings, which I've mentioned briefly, just have mentioned, you know, the third Noble Truth is where Buddha's basically saying, you know what, guys, you can be free of suffering. You can be full of happiness, which implies you can be enlightened, blah, 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 blah. The potential of the mind being innately pure, etc., etc., etc. The First Noble Truth is there is suffering. So now, there are three levels of suffering as far as the Buddha is concerned. I'm sorry, I'm being very revolting here, having to keep cough and blow my nose and everything. But I need to have a tissue from somebody, I'm very sorry. I didn't come equipped. Blow my nose. Pink toilet paper looks good. Oh, too late. A proper tissue. Thank you very much. Oh, no, oh, roll. Come on, darling. My God. Okay, hang on. Blow my nose. This is what Tibetans do, I'll show you. They're very interesting in their habits. They do like this. They do, really. I just did it to show you. Okay. So, okay, the First Noble Truth is there is suffering, and there are three kinds. I'm going back a bit here. I'm going to get into the second one, which is the two kinds of suffering, one of which is the delusions, and then I'll get into that eventually. Okay, we'll go to that point. We're going back a bit now. So the First Noble Truth is there is suffering. Hey, three kinds. First kind, it's like in-your-face suffering. The suffering of suffering. The stuff that we all agree is suffering, that no one has a disagreement with. Animals agree, we all agree, and a way of putting it is it's the stuff that we don't want. Punches in the nose, sickness, no money. It's when we get what we don't want. That's the suffering of suffering. Now, the second one is kind of really tricky and a bit depressing. Buddha calls it simply the suffering of change. And we'll go into it. But what he's referring to here, it was a bit depressing, like I said, is what we refer to as happiness. Oh my God. He calls it suffering. It's a subtler level of suffering. It's like a honey-covered razor blade. And that's basically when we get what we want. So the first one is when we get what we don't want. That's called the suffering of suffering. The second one is what we call happiness, which is basically when you get what you want. The chocolate cake, the nice boy, the pleasant words, the sunny weather, whatever. So that sounds kind of cruel, doesn't it? Like, where do I go with that? Oh my God. So we've really got to understand this one to get very clear what he means by this, because one can easily misunderstand this one, and it is commonly misunderstood when you read Buddhism and don't go into it. You really think you've got to give up happiness, you know. Not true at all. We're going into it. The third kind is even more subtle, and it's called simply all-pervasive suffering, and we'll go into that later. Don't worry now. So I want to go now to the second noble truth, which is there are causes of this suffering. It's sort of obvious. The third thing says, you know what, you can free your water of pollution. Oh, great, how fantastic. The first one is there is pollution, so you better learn to investigate the nature of the pollution so you can recognize it, so you can extract it. Very practical. But the second one is really the point. You have to know what caused the pollution. Because if you don't know what caused it, you can keep taking the pollution out of the water until the cows come home. Until you know what caused it, it will never end, will it? So this is where you really have to do the work, to learn to know what are the causes of suffering, because they are the ones that you then have to work on. And then the fourth noble truth is what you have to do to get rid of suffering. It's a very practical little package, you know. So, okay, what are the causes of suffering? All right. Is that still Jason? There's Jason, right? Okay. So there's Jason. So let's say Jason punches me in the nose, and you see me kind of with blood and going, oh, like this. And you'll go, what's wrong, Robina? What's the cause of your suffering? And I'll go, Jason did it. So as far as we are concerned in the world, and look at the world, there is one cause of suffering. Someone else out there. That's it. You can deduce this by the behavior of the world, can't you? We all believe as a truth the main cause of one's suffering is the action someone else did to me, broadly speaking. Now, Buddha doesn't argue with that. He's not saying that it's good that Jason punches me. No, he would agree that it's not appropriate to punch. You know, he has a list of 10 don'ts. In the very first stages of practice, you know, which is what we're discussing here, there are 10, the very first level of practice in Buddhism, you know, is you're not even going into the mind yet. This is sort of like junior school level, is mainly controlling your body and your speech. Going into the mind, which is what we're doing here, that's more like high school, but I'm going into that one here. But the very first level of practice is to live according to the laws of morality, which is the laws of karma, which basically means zip your lip and keep your hands to yourself. That's it. And this is where all religions and all decent communists would agree. Be nice to other people, you know, don't harm them. Well, pretty much. And that's the very first level of practice. So Buddha completely agrees that punching people in the noses is not an appropriate action to do. He doesn't disagree with this. But when it goes to the second level of practice, and we're getting into the high school here, and we start to look at the actual more deep causes of our suffering, which is the mind, that's where we can then, I have to look into and take responsibility for my part in this. And he says, I do play a role. And this is the point. It's quite difficult initially. So like I said, right now, as far as I'm concerned, Jason is the main cause of my suffering. And that, of course, if it's true, would then tell me that I've got to do something to stop Jason from harming me. I sue him, punch him back, send him to jail, divorce him, whatever. That's the methods we use, isn't it, to stop suffering. Of course, we have to look into how it doesn't stop suffering, because then Joe will punch me and Mary will punch me, so it never ends. But nevertheless, that's the view we have now, the very simple view. But it's interesting, this is also how we think about happiness. Let's say you see me grinning from ear to ear with a hand with $100 in it. Oh, Robina, why are you happy? Jason gave me $100. So effectively, I'm blaming him for my happiness too, aren't I? In other words, we see external causes as the main causes for both happiness and suffering. Again, Buddha is not arguing and saying that giving someone money isn't a good thing. It's a fantastic thing to do. Great, go for it. But as far as I am concerned, as the recipient of the $100 or the recipient of the punch, Buddha is saying, and this is the point in the Second Noble Truth, that I actually am in the center of this. I am the main player. It is my experience of receiving $100. It is my experience of receiving a punch. So I am the main cause of the happiness and the suffering. So how? How come? Well, there are two things. In the Second Noble Truth, he says there are two main causes of my suffering. One is the past action, karma, the seed I planted in my mind before, that I clearly left in my mind and didn't pull out. The proof being it is now ripened as a punch. And the second cause of my suffering, which is really the main one, because the two subsume down to this one, is delusions. So the extent of the delusions in my mind, the extent of my attachment, the extent of my anger, the extent of my whatever else, that is the source of my suffering. The punch, absolutely. But in Buddha's view, it is a secondary cause. Jason's gift of $100 is not the main cause of my happiness. It is merely a secondary cause. The main cause of my receiving $100 is my past generosity, an action similar to generosity. If I get generosity, I must have given generosity, a seed of having given in the past that I left in my mind and didn't uproot, that is now ripening as the experience of receiving. The same with a punch. This is the way Buddha talks about karma. So obviously, to even begin to hypothesize this view, you have to hypothesize the continuity of mind. Because karma is a complete farce and a joke and has no basis if your mother made you or God made you, with respect. It's absurd, it's meaningless, it's clearly insane. Because I've never met this ridiculous man before, and he comes and punches me in the nose. So if it is true that there was nothing about Robina until, before conception, because she either came out of God or came out of mummy and daddy, then this idea of karma is ludicrous. You have to propose the idea. You have to bring into your mind this, hypothesis of continuity of consciousness for karma to stand up as a philosophy. It's a joke otherwise. It has no basis. It's absurd. Don't even waste your time talking about it. So let's assume it for now. That's how we're talking here. We're assuming a continuity of consciousness here, going back. We're assuming a continuity of consciousness here, back. And, the proof of the fact that I must have sown the seed is that I get punched. It's very interesting, when in the world, when someone, let's say he does some terrible thing to me, and we have to, the psychologists try to analyse, why did Robina get punched? Well, what they do is they start looking into Jason's background. They see that his mother must have punched him, or he got punched at school, or they try to understand why Jason punched. But excuse me, it doesn't answer that question, why me? Which is a very real question. It's a very good question. It's a perfect question. Why me? You must ask that question, why me? But just analysing Jason's background and how he had a neurotic mother, that just answers why he punches. It doesn't give me any answer at all. It's completely unsatisfactory. You have to, if it's me who gets punched, it's me who gets happy, the Buddha would simply say, the causes are in me. It's not really very illogical, but it's so outrageous for us because it's so contrary to what we instinctively believe, and because it sounds like blame and guilt and all this rubbish. It's a practical issue we're talking here. It's my experience. So if I have that experience, there has to be a cause in me. This, in fact, is such a huge point. It's amazing. It's vast. And the implication of it, of course, is accountability, taking responsibility. But for the happiness, I've got to keep saying it, but for the happiness too. Because we only ever hear it in terms of the bad stuff. We never ask the questions, why do good things happen? Ever, ever. It's fascinating. And there's very good reasons psychologically for this and the way ego works, which we'll talk about, slowly. So, there are two main causes of my suffering. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of secondary causes. I mean, many hundreds of things have to come together to produce one simple experience of being punched. In exactly the same way that there are hundreds of conditions have to come together to produce one rose. You can narrow it down, can't you, to, seed, soil, sun, water. But anybody who knows botany well, you can become very sophisticated. And once you start, you can see there are countless numbers of causes and conditions that have to come together to produce a simple flower. So here the same, but we're narrowing it down to the two main causes. Why the main ones? Because if I want to get rid of suffering, and if it is true that these are the two main causes, then the obvious conclusion is I'd better start changing my karma and working on my mind. It's clear. Yes, his punch does play a role, obviously. But that's his business. I know we can extrapolate here, go on, oh my God, what about Hitler and all these things? How can you say this, blah, blah, blah. Give it time. It'll become clear. So the Buddha's point in general, so there's two things here. There's karma and the delusions, and we're going to do both, back and forth, okay? Karma and delusions. Karma and the mind, basically. The two pillars. I like to call it this, Is that a hand? Can we leave the questions for a little bit longer? What's the word? Oh, delusion. Okay, good. Thank you very much. That's a good point. Okay. So the English word you've not heard before. Which one? Illusion is not the word. No, the word delusion you don't know. I will indeed. Delusional or delusion in English means that you are thinking something that isn't true. So let's say the usual way of understanding it is if you think if you think I tried to kill you, and you're convinced I tried to kill you, and you're paranoid, and this is an extreme example, like the way they talk and put you in a mental asylum, They would say, oh, the poor thing, he's delusional. He thinks people are trying to kill him. People who believe there are spacemen coming, people who think they're Mozart, These extreme examples you understand my point now. That's delusion, believing something that isn't true. So like I said before, we normally wouldn't use this word in ordinary life. It seems too extreme. But my point is, this is exactly what Buddha is saying. We are all delusional. It's just a question of degree. And I'm trying to go into that now, okay? Are we clear now? Okay, good. Thank you. So let's talk about I'll go back and forth between the mind and karma. Are we supposed to have a tea break or something? Is there a tea break on the schedule? I don't know. No, maybe not. 10 o'clock. What's that mean? 9, 10, 11. Okay. Okay, so far so good? Okay, fine. All right. I'm trying to speak slowly, okay? I'm speaking half the pace of normal, I promise. Okay, so now let's look into the delusions a little bit, and then I'll go to karma and delusions, both. Touch on both. So these mental states, in the mental consciousness, remember we have positive and we have negative. The particular characteristic of the positive, broadly speaking, is that they are the source of one's happiness now and then in the future. And this is interesting, they are not delusional. They're in touch with reality to some extent. The negative states of mind are the source of suffering, they're disturbing, and they are liars. And that's why they cause suffering. So let's look into the liar part, the delusional one. Okay. So as far as this Four Noble Truths is concerned, in the second Noble Truth, where Buddha talks about the causes of suffering, effectively the main cause of one's day-to-day suffering, as far as the delusions are concerned, not the heading called karma, it's this delusion called attachment. So we could spend the next 10 days talking just about that word, and we will not finish. In the bigger picture of Buddhist view of the mind, the deepest delusion, the primordial one, the biggest one, the biggest liar, the mother of all delusions, the root delusion, is in fact called ignorance, or ma-rigpa in Tibetan, which means unawareness. And it's this primordial misconception, which we're going to talk about. And its main function is, they call it colloquially ego grasping. It's this, it's this powerful sense of I that rises, that we talked briefly yesterday, which we're going to go into. That's the root delusion. But effectively, in the Four Noble Truths, Buddha talks about the main cause of our suffering is this other one called attachment, which in fact is the result of ego grasping. Because we have ego grasping, the main one we then have, the main branch delusion, if you like, is the one called attachment. But as far as the Four Noble Truths are concerned, this is the main one. So let's talk about this one. Let's try and recognize this one. And let's try and see how it is delusional and how it causes suffering. Now, the trouble is, it's not a very easy one to talk about because everybody in this room, maybe you know the English word attachment, yeah? Everyone who knows this word. And in your own language, you have a word that's similar. And we use it interchangeably with love. We use it interchangeably with a close connection to somebody. It's a good thing. We think of attachment, I've got closely attached to my children. It sounds like a good thing. So what I'm asking you to do, please, is throw out your own definition. And in order for us to all communicate, you have to have Buddha's definition of this one. Okay? Otherwise, it'll sound very miserable. So attachment is a delusion. It's a liar. It's a misconception. And it's a neurotic state of mind. It's a suffering state of mind. It's a disturbing emotion. Those two characteristics. So what is it? Okay, so let's compare it with one that we think sounds similar, love. So let's say I say to Jason, I love you. So right now, there'd be, the way Buddha's talking, there'd be two things going on in my mind, at least two. One is, there is love there, because love, in Buddhist view, the word love is an altruistic state of mind. It comes under the heading positive states of mind. Attachment comes under the heading negative state of mind. They're two completely different states of mind. One is pure, one is pollution. But the trouble is, they come together like water mixed with water. So it is impossible initially to distinguish them from each other. And also, even more, as I said, we use them interchangeably in our culture. We tend to think they mean the same thing. So get used to this Buddhist view. One is pollution, neurotic, a liar, delusional, the source of suffering. One is virtuous, appropriate, harmonious, connected, and the source of happiness. So how are they different? What's the difference? Well, let's say I say I love Jason. So, looking from the point of view of attachment, as long as Jason keeps doing what my attachment wants, being nice to me, smiling at me, doing what I want, stroking me, coming on time for our dates, then I will always look happy, won't I? So you'll all say, oh, wow, Robina really loves Jason. Jason really loves Robina. But look what happens when he comes late, or look what happens when we start to argue. That's because you have attachment. So let's say Jason and I, forget I love Jason now. The similar thing can occur, can be in relation to objects. Let's say I say, oh, I really like chocolate cake. That's cool. Like something is perfectly reasonable state of mind. It is totally reasonable to like chocolate cake. Buddha has no problem. But then it comes along with attachment. Like the love and attachment for Jason, liking chocolate cake and attachment to chocolate cake come together. We don't distinguish them. We don't even see they're different. We use these words interchangeably. But let's look at how they function. So let's say Jason and I decide, and forget that I love Jason, it's another discussion now. Let's say he and I want to go have some chocolate cake. And then, oh yeah, we love chocolate cake. Let's go and have some. We both look just like we're excited and we like chocolate cake. Oh, that's nice for them. We sit down in the cafe, we order the chocolate cake, but look what happens when carrot cake comes instead. Now, Jason might go, oh, that's cool, I can handle carrot cake, and he proceeds to enjoy it. I will go, hey, excuse me, I ordered chocolate cake here. I'm sorry, madam, we don't have any. Well, I don't want your carrot cake, and I get all upset, and irritated and don't want to pay the bill. Now, beforehand, you couldn't tell that I was attached to chocolate cake, could you? You didn't see the difference between me and Jason. We both look like we just like chocolate cake. But so the only time we're really going to notice attachment is when it doesn't get what it wants. You get my point, people? As one Lama put it, aversion, which is the basic state of mind beneath anger, aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So attachment is really tricky. Anger is easy to see. Attachment is really sneaky because it looks like just pleasure. It looks like liking. And it's until you don't get what you want, it's only then you notice when you have aversion or irritation or annoyance, all these polite words for anger. Then you have to deduce that you were attached because those responses are the sign that you were attached. And that helps us understand the function of attachment. In other words, it's kind of like there's so many layers of it. So the way of talking first, at the most energetic level, attachment is the energy of dissatisfaction. There's this deep primordial feeling that's so subliminal that we don't even label it. It's a deep sense of missing something, a deep sense of lacking something, a deep sense of not having enough, or usually I am not enough. And it manifests as this hankering, this neediness for something. So, being sensory, we look to the outside world. Attachment is searching for happiness. It looks, it gets objects to satisfy the eyes, objects to satisfy the ears, objects to satisfy the tongue, objects to satisfy the tactile. So attachment works full time in searching for things and people and events and experiences. That it's convinced, attachment is convinced that when it gets that, I'll get happiness. It'll fill up this gaping hole. This is attachment. Liking chocolate cake, that's cool. You're allowed to like chocolate cake. It's just the way the world is, Perfectly reasonable. Australians like Vegemite. Tibetans like yak cheese. It's just some cultural thing. But attached to it, that's the problem. And don't be fundamentalist about it. It just, it's just to stop suffering. That's all that you want to recognize attachment. Because the point is simple. If you don't have attachment, and that's pretty advanced, you'd be a very blissful person. You can still like chocolate cake, but you won't have a mental breakdown when carrot cake comes. You'll be able to work on it, deal with it very comfortably. I can say I love Jason, but if I'm if we're advanced in our practice and we've given up attachment, we would not get angry. We could have discussions. We wouldn't get angry. We wouldn't freak out. We wouldn't be disharmonious. I wouldn't get jealous. I wouldn't get depressed. Now, this is surprising, like I said yesterday, to us in our modern world, because we absolutely assume all these states of mind are at the core of our being. They are completely natural, such that we would even think you'd be unnatural if you didn't have them. So you've really got to think freshly about this, because it's not something we think of every day, that we can get rid of all attachment, anger, jealousy, pride. It sounds insane. We can't even imagine a person like that. They seem unnatural to us. But all Buddha's saying is they're not natural in the sense that they're not innate, in the sense that they're not at the core of our being. So attachment is main energy is neediness, this aching sense of being separate, lonely, cut off, aching, needy, lacking, not having. So, of course, it manifests as hankering, looking out there hungrily for someone to love me, for delicious cake, for gorgeous experiences, depending on the habit that you've got. Some people are into sex, some people into money, some people into harming. You name it. Look at our own habits, It doesn't matter what the habit is. The attachment is the constant. And it's so primordial, hard to recognize until it doesn't get what it wants. It's very tricky, like a honey-covered razor blade. So this attachment, this neediness, which then brings expectation. The more I'm needy for Jason to love me, the more I'm believing instinctively, now I've found happiness. Finally, I found happiness. And I've written the novel for the rest of my life, haven't I? You know, husband's house, babies, this, that, happiness, all these massive expectations spontaneously have risen in my mind because I have this bottomless pit of attachment. I put all these expectations on Jason. I mean, that's huge responsibility I'm giving the poor man. So he just has to blink at me the wrong way and I'll have a mental breakdown because my expectations will be shattered. So attachment brings, is neediness. It brings expectations. It then brings manipulation. Oh, she's such a control freak, that Robina. She manipulates Jason to get him to do what her attachment wants. Otherwise, it's like a mental breakdown. Attachment also, the most basic level of how it's delusional, is this is what's very fascinating. When there's attachment in my mind, and then due to habit of eating chocolate cake and becoming very attached to it and expecting it to make me happy, this is what's most fascinating. I will say, oh, wow, that divine chocolate cake. And it looks so delicious, doesn't it? It looks like it's in itself so delicious, like vibrating deliciousness, isn't it? Like as if you put a spoonful of deliciousness into it, along with the chocolate and the flour and the milk when you made it. It looks so real out there from its own side, vibrating this deliciousness, just begging me, demanding that I eat it. It's not my fault. Look, it's the cake's fault. If it wasn't so delicious, it's not my fault. That's how we think, isn't it? It's how we feel. So we're like these little magnets being dragged from pillar to post to this object and that thing, believing it's so divine. Now let's say Jason gets vomits if he eats chocolate cake. And he goes, ugh, look at that disgusting chocolate cake. His view is completely different. It's the same chocolate cake. I'm sorry, there's one chocolate cake there. He sees ugly, I see beautiful. Straight away, this should be enough for us to get a realization of emptiness. We should be blissed out in nirvana just hearing that. There's enough information in just that statement to get us a realization of emptiness, I tell you. It proves there is no cake from its own side that is inherently this or that. It proves it. But we're so addicted to the belief that things are the way I see them, then we'd end up having a war about the truth of chocolate cake. No, it really is ugly. No, it's not as delicious. And we will refuse to give up our view. Look at the world. That's how it's delusional. It's so simple. It's a lie. But we think it's the cake, but it's not. It's my attachment. It's sort of like attachment is when you put like our mothers would tell us, put your rose-coloured spectacles on. It's a great statement. It means I've got my attachment glasses on, so whatever I look at looks divine. Jason looks divine. Cake looks divine. Now Jason puts his aversion glasses on. Ugh, revolting chocolate cake. And this is already something. We can see this somehow. We know that attachment is a viewpoint, is a story that my mind tells me about the cake, about Jason. It's in this way, simply, it's a liar. It's simple, it's a liar. It's very clear. There's nothing cosmic. But because this attachment, the Buddha would say, is eons old, completely programmed into the bones of our being, we live according to it every split second. Running towards the things that look delicious, believing they're delicious from their own side, believing that when I get it, I'll get happy, trying to avoid the ugly things, believing that they're ugly, believing that they're the cause of my suffering. This is the world. Look at the world. This is how we live. This is called samsara. And Buddha says it's a philosophy that's a lie. It's just not true. He's not being moralistic. He's not being religious. He's not saying you're naughty. He's simply telling us we're living in la-la land. We're not seeing truth. I bet you all recognize what I'm saying, right? Is it recognizable? It's common sense, right? So So aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. In other words, if I think of, let's say George Bush is no longer an example because he's gone, But when George Bush was president, everybody loves to hate George Bush, right? We love to hate that person. So then when we look at George Bush, and you can see it, every cartoonist depicted him as a monkey. I mean, they were so rude, That's how he appears to people's minds who don't like him. And we believe it's true. You don't like his politics. He drops bombs on these people. He's stupid. He's ignorant. So that's how he appears to you. You don't go, oh, George Bush is so handsome, but I can't stand his politics. You don't talk like that. Oh, Jason's so divine looking, because he does what you want, basically. But the second he starts not doing what I want, he's going to start appearing ugly to me, because my aversion is coming. I now put my ugly glasses on, my anger glasses. So Jason will now appear ugly to me. In fact, look at your relationships, The guy you thought Jason was utterly blissful 6 months ago, just every thought of him, even his dirty socks were divine, Isn't it? I remember. Everything about him was handsome. But now 6 months later, when your attachment has gone, you look at him and you can't believe this ugly person. How did I ever think this person was nice, you think? Well, he hasn't got any more wrinkles. He hasn't got any more grey hairs. In the 6 months, he looks pretty much the same. So what's changed? Jason hasn't changed much. He was the same person 6 months ago. I just didn't see him, that's all. I saw my own fantasy. Maybe he's mean and ugly. Maybe he farts in the bathroom every morning. But he's always done that. But because I didn't conveniently notice that before, then I sort of attachment blinded me to that. Oh, he farts in the bathroom. You can't imagine. But he's always farted in the bathroom. But I just didn't see it before, because what attachment does, this is what the delusions do. They kind of select certain things from the person, of the object, of the event, of the tree, of whatever it is that you're attached to. And it blinds you to the rest of the picture. You don't see the whole person objectively. You see what you want to see. Attachment causes you to see just the nice bits. It kind of brings out all the nice bits and make them all dazzling and lovely, Now, this doesn't mean that Jason isn't a nice person, but this is what this is pointing out, and this is one of the main ways that these neurotic states of mind are delusional, is that they exaggerate. They exaggerate the story. So attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. Attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of Jason, and therefore exaggerates the expectations, exaggerates all the hankering, exaggerates all the controlling. You build up this huge fantasy that can go nowhere but burst, like a balloon, Attachment is not sustainable because it's a lie. And we all know this. You build up the attachment. You become completely blissful. There's this incredible fantasy. I've found truth. I've found happiness. Finally, I found my soulmate. And this story we've built up is unbelievable. So it's not sustainable, only because it's not true. So inevitably, the bubble will burst. And the bigger you went up, the more you'll go crashing down to despair and depression, or anger. There's nowhere else for attachment to go but despair or anger. We all recognize this. They call it bipolar. Buddha says we're all bipolar, baby, just a question of degree, and I am not being facetious. The attachment mode is when you're in the up mode. Okay, it can go to the extreme of thinking you're Mozart. That's really extreme. It's just attachment gone berserk. And then, or then it goes crashing down when the bubble bursts to despair and hopelessness. We go between these two 1,000 times a day. Of course, in the West we'll go, oh, that's normal. No, Buddha says it's mental illness. Your heart should be breaking for yourself. You should have tears of compassion running down your face for yourself. This is suffering. This is why people have wars, why people divorce, why people go crazy, why people kill each other, why people kill themselves. All comes down to these states of mind. This is Buddha's deal. Everything comes down to the individual minds. All wars, all dramas. It's not making it simple. It's not making it simplistic, but it brings the responsibility to the person having the experience. Yes, there are external world, there are external causes, but that's all we look at in the West. We try to work out what it is out there that causes all the suffering. Buddha says you'll never, 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 never find the answers if you only look out there. We're missing the crucial one in here. So this attachment, effectively, is the day-to-day. It's the default mode. It is there in the mind subliminally all the time. It's not even if it's actively working. It's just there as an assumption. It's just there as an assumption. And it drives us every split second to every choice and every experience. That's samsara. So clearly what we're trying to do then, if Buddha's correct in this and we're prepared to give his view a go, is to begin to recognize it and attempt to go against it, attempt to change the way we see things. And it's a really tough job, minute by minute, full-on practice every day. You know, that's how it is. That's why you've got to have some conviction about it as a method. It's not some mystical thing, being a Buddhist, closing your eyes and hoping for a vision to come. That's how we think of religion. It's insane. It's a hard job to do, to be your own therapist, to work on your own mind. So that's why thinking about all this stuff and having some conviction, from even conceptually, is the first step. You've got to have some conceptual confidence first, not just some airy-fairy, nice feeling, you know. That's not sustainable, because that's attachment. Wow, far out, Buddhism's so amazing. Oh, incredible. That's just attachment talking. It's rubbish. Use our intelligence. Think about things. Analyse, step by step. Try things out. Learn from our own experience. So delusions, this attachment, effectively the main one, the default mode. It's an assumption. It functions at the level of assumption. It goes to unbelievably subtle levels. So the best we can do in the beginning is recognise it at the gross levels, like the chocolate cake, like the person. Seeing the mind that gets overexcited. And then, one fascinating thing about all these delusions is that they're rooted in fear, anxiety. This is very interesting. I think we can really, really see this. Anxiety, more and more every day, is such a common experience. People have panic attacks. Many of you in this room, it's a common experience. We have panic attacks. That's fear. And that, Buddha says, is the actual fundamental function of all delusions. When we have rid the mind of delusions, Buddha says, there is no fear. Whether you're dying, whether you're having your head cut off, it sounds insane, impossible in our usual view of the world. But the Buddhist view would say that fear is eliminated. When delusions are gone, when you've uprooted these misconceptions, when you've realized the way things exist, when you're in touch with reality, your mind is blissful. And I don't mean walking around looking like hyperventilating every minute, our idea of blissful. Meaning steady, clear, wise, joyful, happy, positive, upbeat, confident, loving, kind, compassionate. That's the state of a person who doesn't have delusions. More than that, far more than that, actually. In other words, the extent to which we look into our minds and recognise this attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, all the other ones that come as a result, the more we see them clearly functioning, the more we go deeper and see and unravel them and see the story, the conceptual story that they are and how they're liars, and the more we counteract those lies with a correct story, it's a simple way to put it, the happier and wiser and more grounded and clearer and steadier we will become. This is the way it works. So how about a few questions? Yeah, where are you? Where's the mic? Yes, honey.
Can you explain why happiness is not attachment?
We're using these words here, we're defining them in Buddha's way. So we have to look at the definition of happiness. The Buddha would say happiness is the state that you would have when the virtuous states of mind are prevalent. It's the most simple way of saying it. That's what he means. We can call happiness many things. When I eat chocolate cake is also happiness. But we're talking about the simplest level of understanding happiness as a valid state of mind. It's a joyful, content, peaceful, harmonious state of mind. That's what's meant by happiness here. What do you mean?
Because I'm thinking of, if I may ask, thinking about needs that makes me for my attachment.
I know, but did you first hear how I defined happiness?
Okay.
Say it back to me, what I said.
Happiness.
What is happiness according to how I'm talking about it here? The simplest level of happiness. What is it?
Simplest, it's the stage of mind that we are without attachment.
No, I didn't. Well,
No,
I didn't say. That's
clear.
true, but it's not what I said.
So can you repeat it?
Yeah, I will certainly repeat.
Thank you.
If, in the simple way, the way we would talk about what happiness is a state of mind, that it is the experience that is connected to the positive states of mind. And this happiness would be kind of bring a experience of harmony, connectedness, peaceful, content. These are the qualities of happiness, whether it's 5 minutes of happiness or a lifetime of happiness. So this happiness comes from lessening the delusions and increasing the virtues. So now your question. Based upon that, what is your question? That answers your question?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Someone else. Behind you. Go. Couple back. Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, my dear.
How come pollution in this world or in the thoughts,
What, darling?
pollution, from where it comes?
The physical pollution.
No, the pollution
mind.
in the mind,
Oh.
and why it's there.
Oh, very good point. Okay, well then, your question assumes it had a beginning, doesn't it? Would you agree? It assumes it began somewhere, yeah?
No, not.
It doesn't. Well then, okay.
But why it's there?
No, but that assumes it began. It does. It assumes it began. It assumes it began. But, okay, let's follow. So this moment, let's say there's a moment of anger in my mind. Where does it come from? The previous moment of anger. And where does that come from?
Yes.
The previous moment of anger. And where does that come from? And you go back 1,000,000 years, maybe it began then. No. Where did the anger come from? The previous moment of anger. Well, anger, like everything, is also beginningless. That's why it's in the mind, because you've done it before. The simple answer is, why is anger in your mind? Because you've done it before. That's the answer. That's beginninglessness. That's cause and effect. The other question, it does assume there's a beginning. And there can't be. There can't be. I'm not trying to be clever, but this is the answer, and one has to think about it.
I have thought of,
Yes.
we have healing roots in us, and
Yes, we have good qualities as well. Oh, yes.
not healing.
No,
roots,
and I understand
roots.
exactly what you're saying. Yes.
And maybe it's come from there. Yeah.
No,
Why we
still,
have
your
this
question
root.
is assuming it has kind of got a source. There's an assumption in what you're saying that at some point maybe there was only good, and then how come the bad started? Not like that. Can't be. Okay, another way to answer. Why is there a weed in your garden? What's the simple answer? What's the simple answer?
Yes, there's a seed coming.
Yeah, I know. Well, even more simple is because you didn't pull it out. So if there is anger in your mind, maybe, begin, not begin, don't worry. But the real one is, can I pull it out? Because something is beginningless doesn't mean it is endless. An egg comes from a chicken, and a chicken comes from an egg, and a chicken comes from an egg, and an egg comes from a chicken. But you can break the egg anytime you like. So that's the better one to think about. But the simple reason why there's pollution in our minds, for the same reason as why there is goodness in our minds, the answer's the same. Because we've done them before. That's the answer, and that's why we have to contemplate. That's why are you good at piano? Because you practiced before. Why are you not good at piano? Because you didn't practice before. I mean, you practiced not practicing. You get my point? That's the simple kind of step-by-step cause and effect, not a big capital R reason. We're looking for a big up there reason. There's nothing like that. Look at it organically, each thing as it is, each thing as its own continuum, its own entity, you know, is the way to think about. So it's just some food for thought. All right? Yes, behind there, a couple.
You mentioned eye, ear.
Where are you? I can't see you.
Hi, here.
Oh, yes. Okay, good. Went to the senses, yeah.
Yeah. Eye, ear, nose, and tongue, and how they exist in physicality. And at some point, you also have an inner tongue or an inner ear that tells you that you like chocolate cake or makes you look forward
Well, that's
to
your words, not mine.
No?
No, that's your words. The mental consciousness. Okay, you've got sensory consciousness, yeah?
Yeah.
And you have mental consciousness. So the eye sees shape and color. That's it.
Yeah.
But what it does is trigger instantaneously the mental consciousness, the computer, where all the knowledge and the memories are. And that's where the information about chocolate cake exists, in your mental consciousness.
But is the mental consciousness, do you regard it as something physical or?
Consciousness in its nature is not physical.
But biological basic theory suggests that when you look at or taste something, there's a nervous system all over your body that in a flash of a
yes,
second...
that's the physical. I don't argue with that. That's true. But all the idea to get used to here is the Buddha is saying we have consciousness and we have body. And obviously at the grosser level, they work absolutely interdependently. Absolutely interdependently.
So there's no differential point between...
But there's always, you have an eyeball, and then you have that part of your mind, which is not physical, that functions through the eyeball for you to have a visual experience.
Right.
So keep remembering that point. Yes, the body does all its things. All the biology are all valid points. But the Western view would assert that there's only the biology. There's only the physical. There's only the genetics. There's only the DNA. All Buddha's adding to it, which is sort of a big point, is there's consciousness, which is where that stuff is. And that mixes with the physical. And then you have an experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How does the notion of attachment relate to the concept of justice in general?
Oh, absolutely. Justice.
For example, the Tibetan attachment to
Absolutely.
their spiritual homeland.
Oh, of course, yes. Okay, to use the words in the, try and be very clinical in the way we're using these words. A person who is, let's say a Tibetan person. If they're a normal person like me, like you, I don't know about you, maybe you're a Buddha, but never mind, let's pretend you're a normal person like me and you, this other person, we're all samsaric, which means we have attachment mixed with compassion, love, kindness, and all the other qualities. So it depends on the person. Some people have 70% attachment and only a small amount of love, which means they're very selfish and mean, and most of what they do is focused on attachment. Other people will have a lot of love and a lot of compassion and a small amount of attachment. Depends on the person, So you have to, every individual person has to see which part of their mind is functioning. So let's say, a Tibetan friend of mine, I remember he came into exile 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and he was telling me about his suffering in Tibet when he'd been in demonstrations and he'd been attacked and tortured and his friend had his head blown off and then he escaped and then his father got murdered, mother got murdered, all of this, right? And there he was demonstrating. So normally you think of a demonstration as anger, right? So I remember I said to him, do you ever get angry? And he laughed. He said, angry? What for? So we can imagine it's possible to go on a demonstration, to say that is injustice, you must not do that, and not be angry, which means having no attachment. But that's called compassion. That's called justice. Because, the world is full of suffering. We can see it. People do terrible things to each other. So just because so you can go, that is not right. Look at George Bush dropping bombs on Iraq, and maybe you think that's not a moral action. And you can be shocked by that, outraged, and think that is very bad. Now that's a fact. It is not good to harm others. But it doesn't follow you have to be attached to that. It doesn't follow that you have to be angry. But we can't imagine being that way without being angry. It's a brand new idea to us to think you can have compassion and go on a demonstration but not have anger. So that's a very fresh thing to think about. I remember one time the Dalai Lama was interviewed and the person said, but anger looks like it's a really good state of mind. It makes you act. And he said, I know what you mean. But he said, if it's mainly anger, it doesn't last. But if it's coming from compassion, which means to see injustice and to act to try and change it, that's compassion. You can still shout and yell. You can still demonstrate. But it doesn't have to be anger, which is the wish to harm somebody. Anger is blame, is hopeless, is impotent, is coming from frustrated attachment. Do you get my point? Yeah. And I think in our world, we can't imagine love without attachment and we can't imagine compassion without anger. But this is the point that Buddha's making. They're different states of mind. So normally we think if you give up attachment, you kind of, oh, well, I've got to give up chocolate cake. I've got to give up happiness. We chuck the baby out with the bathwater. And then we think if we've got to give up anger, we also think we've got to give up caring. Not true. Just not true. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Over there. But it's a tough job, of course. Especially if you've had lots of anger, you know. Yes.
Just wanted to ask a question about suffering.
Yes.
Suffering seems to alleviate suffering in the world, seems to be a major theme in Buddhism. But looking back at my life, I think I learned a lot more from the times when I had to struggle and suffer.
Yep.
And the times when I was
That's
more
right.
comfortable and
yes.
just in a neutral state of mind.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that?
I agree. Yes, it's like, it's sort of saying, you know, if you're an athlete and you break a leg, I bet you learn a lot from that broken leg. You learn to appreciate your being an athlete. You learn many things and you get a lot of courage from this. But I think once you've learned that, honey, you don't need to keep breaking your leg to do it. You learn the lesson from the suffering because the suffering comes from the past actions. But the aim is to get rid of that suffering, and that's one of the things you learn from it. Because once you've gone beyond the suffering, you've learned the lessons and you are now constantly not attached and not angry and only loving and kind and wise and doing all the right things. Once you've learned the lesson. But we don't learn the lesson. We have to keep having the same old experience and we go around in circles. So absolutely, given that we have now still not purified all the causes of our suffering, at least let's be so wise as to learn from our suffering. That's fantastic. But one of the learnings has to be, I never want this again. Are you getting the point I'm making?
Yeah, so in that view, it's kind of a natural transition in life. Suffering it's natural.
Natural meaning, for you meaning what? Natural meaning?
Meaning something that has to happen.
Oh, no, it only has to happen if you've created the causes for it. If you've got to the point where you've gone beyond causing suffering because you've given up delusions, you will no longer have suffering. That's the whole point of this practice. That's the whole point. The aim is to get rid of suffering. That's the point. But if you haven't got rid of suffering yet, then at least you learn from it and use it as grist for the mill. Yes, but it's not natural insofar as you can't get rid of it. This is the point here. The Buddha says we can get rid of it. Are we communicating? But if we haven't yet finished suffering, we've still got seeds in there that are going to ripen as suffering. At least let's be intelligent and utilize it. Then we're really going to learn quick. You with me? Is it answering your point?
Yes.
Great. Someone else? Up here. Okay. Uh-huh.
Hey, you talked yesterday about the mind and the feelings and...
Would you start again, please? Do you mind?
You talked yesterday
What's your
about... Nooit. Nooit.
Lohit.
Yes.
Okay.
You talked yesterday about the mind, the mental thoughts, the mental feelings, the thoughts. And you said it's not physical. It's not
the mind is not physical, right?
Yeah, it's not from our parents.
That's right.
But I'm asking, what about genetic
I
things?
understand.
Like
Okay.
if I think that my way of thinking, I'm sure that I got it on my way on this
I
life.
understand.
But still, I'm thinking that I got the negative things, the negative parts. I'm some for my father, some for my mother.
I understand.
And what's the connection with karma?
I understand. Okay. So this is where we can now start to talk about karma. We're going to finish in 15 minutes, but we can start, okay? So you've digested what we've done so far. You're not feeling indigestion yet? Yes, go. What, darling? Hang on. Can we give the mic? So I'm going to go into karma, answer Logit's question. So you say your part as well. Yes.
My question was, isn't reality itself something that is delusional because it varies from person to person?
May I ask you to say it again? What's your name?
Sonia.
Sonia, would you please repeat that again?
Isn't reality itself something delusional since it varies from person to person, and what might be reality for Buddha might not be reality for others, and laws themselves change from one epoch to another.
At the ultimate level, Buddha says reality is objective. Ultimate level, Buddha says it's objective. And we'll talk about that, not now, but we'll go into this. Conventionally, yes, if I've got attachment and he's got aversion, my reality is that it's delicious, and his reality is that it's not delicious. But the Buddha's saying that's not reality. That's the point. So right now, everybody's different views of reality are all false because they're all our own distortions. So they're not reality finally. They're our own viewpoints, but they're fantasies.
Yeah, but even like yesterday we were talking about laws. You said, for example, that's the law, or it's a law. But laws themselves vary from one epoch to another. Like there was a law.
No, not natural. Gravity has always been.
That the sun moved around the earth, but then now there's.
But one was not true.
Yeah, but at that time it was.
But
reality
it's not
for
true.
everybody.
It doesn't matter. I don't care what it was then. If it isn't true, it wasn't true. A law is something that's true. So gravity, given the universe we live in, with the moon and the stars and the way the whole world is, gravity has been found to be a law. So if it's true, it's true. You know, they back then in those days, you know, the Catholic Church and that lot, all believed the sun moved around the earth because it looked like it. But the fact that we believed it then doesn't mean it's true. We're all living in a lie. That's not reality, it's a lie.
Yes, but several years later, I mean, what we believe to be a law might be disputed by
well, then we will find out
evidence.
if that's a lie as well. That's the job to do, to find out what is truth, indisputably the truth. That's the point. That's the point. If everything is merely just something we all make up, well, it's, you know, why bother trying anything? Just relax. Enjoy our fantasies. It doesn't matter. But the point that Buddha's making is, this is his point, it's the absolute central point that he is making, that suffering comes from believing in lies. Happiness comes from being in touch with truth. So that might be not true, but you're going to have to find out by doing it, you know. But this is his central point. This is the actual central point of his entire path. Everything comes from this one. So we're investigating, aren't we? Are we not, Sonia?
Sorry, where?
Are we not investigating this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic. Let's keep investigating. So let's now talk about karma. Okay? Start to present karma. We can continue after lunch. So we're looking at the second noble truth here. The second noble truth. There are causes of suffering. There are two main causes of suffering: past karma, past action that then sows a seed in the mind that ripens in the present, as Jason punching me, and then the delusions in my mind which interpret this, which then cause me to be angry, to blame him, to punch him back, and so the ball keeps rolling. So we looked briefly at the delusions. We're going to keep talking about it. So now let's look at karma, which is answering Logit's question. In other words, what role does parents and the genes play? Okay, which is also that gentleman back there, his question. What's your name? Back row. No, this one. What's your name, darling? Who? Anuj. So Anuj's question too is touching on the same point. Okay, so you could say, there's many ways of talking about karma, but this is the way I like to talk about it. There are four, if we look at our present life, our present self, right now. Let's use Logit as the example, because she mentioned her parents. and how her bad qualities come from her parents. She didn't mention her good qualities. Maybe they come from herself, I'm not sure. But she wants to blame her. Huh? I know. But do your good qualities come from your parents as well? Or just your bad ones? Lorit? Confess? Huh? There you go. Okay, so if we use Lorit as the example, here she is. There are 4 ways in which Lorit's past actions are ripening in the present as her particular life. The first way that karma ripens is, and this is, okay, again, this is a really simplistic way of presenting these laws, okay? When one goes into them in great depth and one has direct experience of it, it's incredibly sophisticated. There are millions of different factors involved. We're just being very simple in the way the law is presented as a law, okay, as the way karma works. So the first one, the crucial one, is the cause, the actions Lorit did in the past that caused her consciousness to leave the past body, and according to this particular view of the world, it was maybe about not more than 7 human weeks before her consciousness entered into the egg and sperm in her mummy's womb, okay? Unless she was conceived in a petri dish or something. We assume she was conceived in the old-fashioned way. So not more than 7 weeks before conception in her mother's womb, her consciousness, obviously at a subtler level, and we'll go into the death process later. It's in those notes you've got. We'll discuss the whole process of how you die and how the mind gets more subtle and so on and so forth, okay? So not more than 7 weeks before that, her consciousness was in another body. So at the time of her death, we can deduce from the fact that she's a human now, that her mind went to a human mummy's womb as opposed to the dog's womb in the backyard, you know, that an accumulation of morality karma. Remember the word karma translates as action. And every split second of every thought, every action of body and speech is a karma that will bring an action that will leave an imprint or a seed in the mind that will ripen as a reaction later. Okay, so the first one, the cause of her getting a human life. The Buddha would say that to get a human life, as opposed to a mosquito or a dog, and just have to look at the numbers, there are probably more mosquitoes in the summer here than there are humans at this moment. The cause of getting a human life is an unbelievable coming together of much morality, which at the most basic level is a very conscious refraining from harming, in particular refraining from killing. This builds up an accumulation of virtuous karma in the mind, morality karma, of not harming, not killing, and then of course of actively benefiting others, and probably practice in the context of a spiritual path. An accumulation of this morality karma has built up, you know, along with much generosity karma and many other good qualities that causes a particular morality karma to ripen like a seed before she even stops breathing in the past life. That becomes the main cause, and they call this the throwing karma, the main cause that literally programs her consciousness as she goes through the death process and the mind gets more subtle, more subtle, more subtle, until eventually it leaves the past body. It's already completely programmed and will find its way inexorably on autopilot to her mother's womb. So in other words, her mother and father have nothing to do with creating Lorit. They're lying there having sex, most likely, minding their own business. And she comes along. Don't blame your parents. Now, obviously, so the first cause of who she even is in the first place, getting this human body, being this particular person, is simply getting a human life, is the past morality, a build-up of that, practiced very consciously, such that at the time of the death it ripens, the mind is on autopilot, and it finds its way to her mummy's womb. Where were you born? Israel? Okay. In Israel, to a nice Israeli mummy and daddy. Okay, so that's the first one. But now, Hitler had one of those, didn't he? He had a human life too, didn't he? He had a nice mummy and a nice daddy doing their trip, and his little mind, morality ripened, because there's millions of tracks of karma, okay? It's highly complex. So morality karma, and we deduce this logically if we see that the fruit called a human is the result of morality. Like the rose is the result of a rose seed and so on. Human life in general, just getting one, is the fruit of a particular track, so in his case, morality. same. But maybe that's where the differences, that's where the similarities end, you know, with Lorit and Hitler. There's no evidence yet that Lorit has been out there multi-murdering people, have you? She's maybe not telling us, you know. So the first cause is morality, to get a human life. Now we come to the next way that her, and indeed Hitler's and anybody else's, karma ripens in this present life. And this is getting to your answer. That is, they call this next one the actions similar to the cause. So, obviously, with the materialist model, we have to deduce that if you're angry, that anger came from your genes, therefore came from your father. We have to deduce this. There's no other answer, you know. We can't. That's the materialist model. That's the only way we see things. But the Buddhist view would be your consciousness came fully programmed. From the first second of conception, your consciousness was fully programmed with all the tendencies of Lorit's personality, her characteristics, her anger, her love, her being good at music, her laziness, her kindness, her attachment. Whatever your characteristics are, every single one of them, they are mental, they are in your mind, they are the fruit of your having done them before, which assumes a past life for the moment. Every single one. Now, how come you're similar to your father is because he also has those characteristics. And that's often what drives your mind to that father, because you're both similar. It doesn't follow. I mean, fascist mummies can give birth to nice little Buddhist babies. Buddhist mothers can give birth to rapists. Do you get my point here? Hitler's mother wasn't some maniac. There's no evidence that she was a multi-murderer and a Jew hater. Do you understand my point here? We don't know what else to think about Hitler. How come Hitler? There are 47 different biographies trying to work out why Hitler. Well, karma would say he brought those imprints with him. Strong imprints from how many countless lives. His personality was uniquely his. They were his mental states. You can't point to his mother's genes to find any, you know, Jew-hating, multi-murderer genes in there. We can find a few, like depression maybe, you know, or like certain things. But it's very, very small. You get my point? So the Buddha would say, every single one of your characteristics, your personality, they are in their nature mental. They are consciousness. They are not physical. And they didn't come from God, and they didn't come from mummy or daddy. But you could share them with your parents. You know, why not? But your father's came from him, not his father. Yours came from yours. And what caused you to come together was a strong karmic connection between the two of you. I mean, how come we meet anybody? Is this karma between us? How come Jason hits me? Is no accident. I've hit him in the past. How come you go to that mummy and that daddy? Because you've got a strong connection with those two parents. You ran like a magnet to their womb, to her womb, you know. But you brought your characteristics with you. Now, let's say you have a tendency to have a certain disease, and that's a genetic thing. You see, your mother's got it. Well, that's because you still created the cause for that. In one of from the past karma, let's say, you know, one particular action you did creates the cause for you to be born to a mother who has those genes. You caused that, to choose that mother. You don't choose really, but the karma drove you to that mother who has the genes to get cancer or the genes to get this disease or that disease. You did the actions that caused you to have that particular condition as your life. The genes play the role, but they're only secondary, like the punch. The main cause is your past action. Everything comes down to that every time. All the goodness in your mind comes from your past actions. So now I'm already implying the third way that karma ripens, which is the answer to how come those parents, how come Israel, how come that education, all the things that happen to you, all the people you meet, how they see you, do they like you, do they not like you, do they rape you, do they love you, do they kiss you, do they whatever. This is called experiences similar to the cause. So if you look at your life and you go through your life and you look, that person loved me, this person was mean to me, that person doesn't believe my words, they are all the result of you doing those kinds of actions in the past. So, you know, every one of the actions, and like in this list of 10 don'ts, it's in your notes as well, the 10 non-virtuous actions. You know, every one of them has these different ways that karma ripens. I haven't said the fourth one yet, it's coming. Well, I'll say that first. So the fourth way your karma ripens is called environmental karma. And that is the very way that you personally are impacted by the external world. Even the house you live in. Maybe you lived in a house that was all mouldy and wet and ugly, maybe stinking hot in the summer and freezing cold in the winter. But around the corner, someone had lovely breezes and it was always nice and pleasant. Let's say you live in an environment that's stinky and smelly. Someone else lives in an environment that's very pleasing. Even this, even the way the elements impact upon us, is the result of our own past actions. Whether you get born in a desert, whether you're born in a beautiful country, this is the result of our past actions as well. Because even this external world, for the Buddha, does not exist from its own side. This is just a bunch of elements that have come together in a particular shape and configuration called Israel, called Dharamsala, called stinky desert, called ugly, whatever. The elements, this is also the result of karma. So the very way the environment impacts upon you, all the things that, how you're seen by others and treated by others, the parents you get, the people who, in your life, all your own tendencies and even your own humanity. All of it is the first cause, the main cause is your past actions. This is the way the Buddha would say. So that broadly answers the question, but it just needs thinking about, that's all. And we're going to again unpack it as we go along. Time for lunch, or time for something. No, time for your stretching or something. What are you going to do? Yeah, go. Yes. Give the man the mic. Chuck the mic over. There it is. Yep.
Hello. We were talking about Hitler and his bad actions.
That's right.
So it's fruit from his previous life.
Yes, that's right.
And if human life is so precious and rare,
yes,
how could a person like that have a chance to be born in a human realm?
Well, he doesn't. Forget it. Few eons of being in the lower realms.
But the previous lives,
yeah, but he wasted it, didn't he? Just because you got something good now doesn't mean you keep doing good with it. You can get money in the bank from working hard. Then you can go and waste it all, can't you? Because you don't realise its value. So obviously he got a human birth as a result of virtue, but because of the other strong tendencies to be harmful came along with that life, which is unfortunate for him. He messed his life up. He made a mess. He wasted it. He tipped it down the toilet. No? What's wrong? What's wrong with that?
Probably his bad actions were fruit from his previous...
According to the law of karma, they have to be. There's no other answer, yeah. But there are trillions of lives and trillions of actions. And the package called Hitler, or the package called you, is just the ripening of very few of those. And for whatever reason, the highly complex law that karma must be, it came together that in that particular life he got a human life, but he got those crazy tendencies, you know. But also, it's a coming together of all the millions of players in that scenario, all the millions of people who are called Nazis, all the millions of people who he harmed, the Jews and whoever else he harmed. There's this huge coming together of this intricate interdependence of millions of minds, all coming together to produce this scenario called whatever you want to call it. All the Tibetans, too, coming together at the time, the karma ripening, a good human birth, but then their suffering ripened. And then the coming together of all those Chinese, this big interdependent scenario called Tibet suffering, you know. Because every single player in that event, the Tibet event, the Hitler event, every player in it caused that themselves. Every single sentient being in the universe at every single split second of their life is experiencing the fruit of their past actions. This is just, the Buddha would say, this is the natural law called karma. Every one of us, every giraffe, every ant, every Hitler, every human, every dog is experiencing the fruit of their past actions and is creating the causes for their future actions. Every split second. Yeah, when their animal karma runs out, they've got millions of human karmas there sitting there waiting for the conditions to ripen. Yes. None of them are permanent.
So,
hang on. What, sweetheart? It's in the mind from the past actions. A dog can't do much morality as a dog. Its mind is... It's 11:04, it's stretching time. Let's do it after lunch. Okay, we'll go into this whole thing after lunch. So listen, can we finish first, Jason? Sorry, darling. Sorry, I'm not trying to be a policeman or anything. Just put the other book end up, okay? I like to put the book ends up. So, and I've got to tell you what you've got to discuss in your little discussion groups, okay? So the way these discussion groups go, it's really excellent to get just 3 or 4 of you. So you can have a dynamic conversation, not just sit there, be passive and listen to everybody else. I cannot stress to you, you know, if you really want to discuss this stuff, if you don't want to, that's your call. Please, believe me. But if you really want to get your teeth into this stuff and go through it and unpack it and come up with things, you've got to discuss it. Like I said to you yesterday, when I studied the philosophy at some point, you know, more depth, the Lama he always say 25% comes from listening, 75% from your debating, your analysis, your meditating, your thinking, like that. So, 3 or 4 of you, max, even 2 of you, you go off somewhere, for however long it is, I don't know, an hour or something, whatever the timetable says, I don't know. But I want you to take, so what we've discussed so far, we've already covered an enormous amount. Pretty much broad view of what the mind is. Not physical, continuity, beginningless, based upon the idea of cause and effect, not created, and then beginning to look at karma, just beginning. They're really the 2 things we've talked about, and delusions, beginning to look at positive and negative states of mind, sensory and mental. So I would suggest that you take 1 or 2 of these points and unpack them, pull them to pieces, and try and get something really coherent, and then come up with some good questions on those points. Is that clear? Take 1 or 2 of the points as you wish. But don't be superficial with it. Try and go deep, rip it to pieces. Even if you take the 1 point of beginninglessness of mind to try and get some even conceptual logic to it. You know, like your point. What's your name, darling? Behind Jason. You told me, that's right, Sonia's point. You know, how come? Try and hear how that assumes a beginning. It's a really good point to go into. That's for your discussion, that's all. So you can come up with some questions when we come back. So finish with that little bookend, thinking, okay, we've been here for 2 hours, look, 2 and a bit. Every split second of that time, every one of you sitting up there, including me, have had thoughts based upon, presumably, what I've been saying. Maybe not, maybe you're doing your own trip in there, that's cool. But each one of us had some thoughts. Every one of those is a seed we've planted. So we think, great, may these seeds, may we nourish them with our discussion, with our talk, with our efforts, so that these seeds do grow at some point into the development of my own amazing potential, no matter how long it takes. Why? So that I can be blissful and happy and clear and wise, so that in turn I can be of benefit to others. That's like our dedication, you know? Motivation, dedication, like that, these 2 bookends. That's all. Enjoy your stretching. And your lunch. Oh, no, sorry, one more. I'm sorry. Jason. Listen, there's a way to eat your lunch too, but maybe there's enough for now. We'll do lunch later. Okay, never mind. Eat your lunch how you like. We'll do it later. There's too many things. Goodbye. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jason.